Thank you.
Good evening, brethren, and welcome to the 10th installment of the Grand Masters Q&A for 2020. I'm your host and MC for the evening, Dan Hotchkiss, and I'll give you a brief overview of what we're going to discuss for our topics this evening. First and foremost, I will introduce our Grand Master. He'll provide us with an opening statement, and immediately following that, he will give us an overview of what transpired at our annual and semi-annual communications that were held on November 21st. Following that, our Grand Treasurer, Right Worshipful Brother James Lawrence, will provide an overview of the proposed per capita change, as well as his planned discussion meetings that will happen in the spring. Following that, our Deputy Grand Master, Right Worshipful Brother David Collins, will provide an overview of the Grand Master's COVID guidelines for lodge meetings. And then following that, we'll turn it back over to our Grand Master for an overview of any upcoming lodge annual meetings and installation of officers and his policies and procedures regarding those particular meetings. And following that, our last topic of the evening, our Deputy Grand Master will roll out our new Masters class format. So, brethren, certainly like to welcome you and any others who may be joining us this evening, and hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. So at this point in time, brethren, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to you the most worshipful Grand Master of the most worshipful Grand Lodge of the ancient and honorable fraternity of free and accepted Masons of the state of New Hampshire, most worshipful brother Kenneth Antle Clay Jr. Most worshipful.
Thank you, Right Worshipful Brother Hotchkiss, and thank you once again for the fantastic job that you do organizing the content for these Q&As. It's critically important that we allow the brethren of our grand jurisdiction an opportunity to get frequent updates on the happenings of Freemasonry in our state. So I appreciate all your efforts. Brethren, good evening and happy holidays. Merry Christmas. I'm very, very pleased to be able to come to you this evening. I've worn my Christmas tie that was a fine gift from Jewel Lodge. I appreciate that very much. And I want to bring you the warm and fraternal greetings of the most worshipful Grand Lodge of the ancient and honorable fraternity of free and accepted Masons for the state of New Hampshire. And I want to bring you my own personal greetings and those of my wife, Tammy, and our family. This is a wonderful time of year, and I hope that each of you has an opportunity. I understand the challenges that we face with COVID in perhaps not being able to get together face-to-face as we normally would at Christmas time, but certainly take advantage of tools such as this to be able to connect with family and friends. I am going to start out this evening's program by giving you a brief update of what took place on the weekend of November 21st. And what I am referring to is a document that each of you should have received from our Grand Secretary. Right Worshipful Brother Lewis and our office staff do a fantastic job of making sure that everything is documented properly. So let me start out with the 231st annual communication of Grand Lodge. I'm not going to go through all of the items, but I'm going to touch on some of the more important ones. First, it was my real honor and pleasure to present to the Grand Lodge distinguished guests from both outside and inside our grand jurisdiction. I was very pleased that we were joined by the Grand Master of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we were also joined by illustrious Brother Dave Glatley, Sovereign Grand Commander of the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction of Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite. They were the two dignitaries that were able to join us from outside the state. From inside the state, we were fully represented. We have all of our appendant bodies that were there, Eastern Star, Rainbow, DeMolay, York Rite, Scottish Rite. Everyone was there, did a fantastic job representing. I was very pleased to hear the reports that were brought forth. I'm also very pleased to announce that there was a merger that really has been in the works now for about a year. Harris Lodge, number 91 of Warner, and Horace Chase Lodge, number 72 of Pennacook, did an excellent job of making sure, under the direction of Right Worshipful Brother Larry Sprague, that everything was taken care of. And so at your annual communication, the committee the Committee on New Lodges recommended moving forward. And in fact, your Grand Lodge did vote for this merger, and that merger will take effect on January 1st, 2021. There was some legislation that was brought up, and because of the fact that I had to limit attendance, that meant that people who have Grand Lodge voting rights weren't necessarily able to attend. Therefore, I thought it was in the best interests of all involved that we defer any legislation, voting on legislation, until May of 2021. There were also a number of honors and awards that were presented. I'm very pleased to announce that the Grand Masters Award was presented to Morrison Lodge, number 90 of Northwood, and that honorable mention was made to Tucker Lodge, number 99 of Raymond, and Horace Chase Lodge, number 72 of Pennacook. Ritual Excellence Awards were presented to Worshipful Brother Ben Feldman and Right Worshipful Brother Chris Busby. The Major General John Sullivan Distinguished Service Medal in Bronze was presented to Right Worshipful Brother Ryan Flynn and Right Worshipful Brother Chris Busby, both of Ancient York Lodge, number 89. And as you all know, they are key members of the Communications Committee, along with Right Worshipful Brother Scott Newberry. And between the three of them, they do a fantastic job. And then last, but certainly not least, of the highest distinction that a member of our proud fraternity within the state of New Hampshire can receive, that being the Jeremy Ladd Cross Distinguished Service Medal. I had the distinct honor of presenting that first on Friday evening to Right Worshipful Brother David S. Collins, Evening Star number 37, but you probably know him more as your Deputy Grand Master. And then Right Worshipful Brother Mike Salisbury of Benevolent Lodge, who you all know has done a fantastic job over the years leading us in ritualistic excellence. We then went immediately into our semi-annual communication. It was our 163rd semi-annual communication. And there, as you all know, we did mail-in voting. And this is something that is something that was brought on as a result of the pandemic. But I actually think it went very well. We received somewhere in the neighborhood of 260 ballots, which is terrific. And as a result of those ballots, your Grand Lodge has elected David S. Collins to be your next Grand Master, Daniel R. Hotchkiss, Deputy Grand Master, Scott R. Borthwick, Senior Grand Warden, Larry A. Sprague, Junior Grand Warden, James H. Lawrence III will continue as your Grand Treasurer. Most Worshipful Brother John F. Gordon will continue as your Deputy Grand Treasurer, and Right Worshipful Brother Mark Elangis will continue as Grand Secretary. So I am very, very pleased. These brethren have all toiled for years in the quarries, doing fine work for the Grand Lodge of New Hampshire. I'm super, super happy that went just fine. We then had a meeting of New Hampshire Masonic Care. It was not as long a meeting as it has been in the past, but that's because most of the trustees were carrying over. However, it's notable that an impressive donation of $5,000 was presented to New Hampshire Masonic Care from the New Hampshire Masonic Charitable Foundation. So I'm very, very proud that once again, we were able to support that great cause. And then once again, we brought forth a vote for another lodge merger. A report from the Committee on New Lodges recommended that Fraternal Lodge number 71 of Farmington and Unity Lodge number 62 of Union, they had completed all of their work. Again, This was overseen at a Grand Lodge level by Right Worshipful Brother Dan Hotchkiss, and therefore the vote was favorable, and our Grand Lodge voted that these two lodges be merged into one effective November 21st, 2020. So very, very proud to see these two lodges come together. I think the four lodges that merged into two, I have all the confidence in the world that it's going to be very positive for these lodges and for the members that make up those two lodges. We then had a report on the Committee on Finance and Investment, and I'm not going to steal his thunder. Right Worshipful Brother James Lawrence will be speaking to a bit more about what he presented during the meeting. There was quite a slew of legislation that was brought before us that once again will be held over until the May 2021 annual communication. And then we wrapped up the day with a very impressive educational program that was put on by Right Worshipful Brother Ryan Flynn, District Deputy Education Officer for District Number 2. And his topic was Masonic Renaissance. It's a time to join the movement. So, brethren, what I was so pleased about with this event was the fact, number one, and most importantly, that the event was held safely and securely. I believe that everything that the committee did, and that was primarily spearheaded by Right Worshipful Brother David Collins. The committee did a fantastic job making sure that contact tracing forms were in place, that antibacterial was provided, social distancing was maintained, masks were in use throughout. It was a very, very safe event, and I'm very pleased to say that that all went well as a reflection of that. Chris, I'm not sure your comment. I just did mention fraternal and unity merger. I'm also particularly pleased with the session from the standpoint that each of my four pillars really came into play that weekend. Retention, we had brethren there. There were a few newly raised Master Masons that were able to join us, and they got to see some of the great workings of your Grand Lodge. Ritualistic excellence, I think that everyone involved in the day did a fantastic job with their ritual. Masonic education, certainly spearheaded by Right Worshipful Brother Dave Ackridge and Right Worshipful Brother Flynn. And then communication. I think all throughout the process, everyone was fully informed and made aware of how we were going to be conducting this program so that everyone felt safe and secure. So I'm going to now turn it back to Right Worshipful Brother Dan Hotchkiss to see if there might be any questions. I see there is some chat regarding fraternal and unity, and maybe I neglected to mention that. So Dan?
Thank you, Most Worshipful. Actually, no specific chat or questions regarding that. Looks like maybe some fun wording. But brethren, we certainly look forward to the two lodges that have merged into their new lodge, and we know that they'll be able to offer significant contributions and make those lodges even stronger. So we certainly appreciate that. And Grandmaster, so I don't see any other top questions, so we're going to move on to our next speaker. And brethren, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to you our Grand Treasurer, who gave us a report on the Finance Committee, as you heard from our Grand Master at the semi-annual communication on November 21st. And part of that was a discussion about a proposed change in the per capita. And he's going to have some discussion sessions, I believe, set up, and he's going to talk a little bit more in detail about that. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to you Right Worshipful Brother James Lawrence. Right Worshipful.
Thank you for that introduction, Right Worshipful Brother Hotchkiss. As we've heard earlier from both the Most Worshipful Grand Master and also from Right Worshipful Hotchkiss, at this year's semi-annual communication, I presented a report on behalf of the Committee of Finance that detailed not only how the finances of Grand Lodge were doing, but also made a proposal for the first time since I've been Grand Treasurer, to actually increase the per capita. Now, no Grand Treasurer would ever relish or desire to request an increase in the per capita. As a matter of fact, this jurisdiction has a very long tradition of living within its means and living out basically the Yankee tradition of frugality and not requesting per capita increases, sometimes to good effect and also sometimes to our detriment. If you think about the last time that we actually increased our per capita for inflationary purposes, you have to go back some 10 years ago when then Grand Treasurer Dan Hotchkiss traveled throughout this jurisdiction under the period of time where Most Worshipful Grand Master Paul Leary was the Grand Master of this jurisdiction. And there was a lot of discussion there because we realized at that point in time that the finances of Grand Lodge were not in good shape. We were having a difficult time in protecting the precious assets, particularly our Grand Lodge endowment, with the increasing pressures of increased costs, the cost of inflation, cost of doing business. And it was time that we needed to go forward with a proposal to increase the per capita. Unfortunately, because we had gone so long before that, bringing forward a per capita increase, that particular increase that was actually proposed doubled our annual per capita. And unfortunately, even with doubling the per capita at that point in time, by the time it took effect, it basically could not avoid us eroding or decreasing or damaging the assets that we had in the endowment. And that's a pretty drastic step to take, to actually increase our per capita by 100%. Yet it was a necessary evil. It was done. And we now know through the vision of hindsight that not only was it necessary, it did in fact stop the bleeding and enabled us to get our endowment back under control and continue the path of keeping that endowment growing so that we would be able to pass down those precious resources that were left to us so that they could continue to be used for the mission of Freemasonry in this jurisdiction for future Masons in perpetuity. Now, how did we get there? If you look at the history leading up to just prior to the 2011-2012 timeframe, there were several proposals to make smaller regular increases to our per capita that could have and would have avoided us having to double our per capita in order to get our financial house in order. Unfortunately, no one could seem to come up with a proposal that was both widely recognizable as a simple yet understandable approach that would be acceptable to the majority of brethren in this jurisdiction. We also had something going on then, which unfortunately continues on to this day, and that is the number of Masons in this jurisdiction seems to be declining at a rate of about a net of 170 Masons per year. As a matter of fact, this one fact alone has decreased the amount of revenue that we have been able to recover through our annual per capita by a six-figure number over the past decade alone. This, combined with the ordinary pressures of inflation and increasing costs of doing business, continue to put financial strain on our Grand Lodge in this jurisdiction. So I'm going to bring that forward to where we are now. As a result of looking at this history, looking at where we are now, the Grand Lodge Finance Committee came to the conclusion that we had no other responsible action that we could take at this time other than to propose a small and regular increase to our per capita. Now, why would we choose to do this? The question is, well, it's not even a question. The reason is that what we wanted to do is we wanted to be forward-looking, and we wanted to avoid the possibility of having to come forward to the brethren like we did some 10 years ago and asking for a very large increase to the per capita. We wanted to, instead of proposing a large one-time increase, propose smaller, more manageable, regular incremental increases to prevent us having that requirement to push a large burden all of a sudden on the brethren of the jurisdiction. This is something that I think most of the brethren at the time we proposed a large increase some 10 years ago requested, and it's something that we're listening to and something that we very much want to put in place to avoid. So as a result, at the last semi-annual communication on behalf of the committee, I presented our proposal, which was to implement a 3.5% increase per year that would take effect immediately upon passage and would result in a $1.58 increase in the year of 2022. It is the belief of the committee that this will go a long way to not only keeping our financial resources where they need to be so that we could responsibly manage them in perpetuity, but will also stave off some of the impact of the loss of Freemasons in this jurisdiction over that time. Our current plan is that during the town hall meetings that are scheduled throughout the month of March of 2021, I will give a more detailed explanation as to why and how we came up with the figures that we are proposing for this per capita increase. I will also be working with the communications committee in order to provide an online venue to provide additional informational sessions that I can communicate better and allow the brethren some more time to ask questions about how this may impact our finances in Grand Lodge and what the detailed analysis that went into the discussions and the decision ultimately to come up with this proposal. Once again, on behalf of the Finance Committee, I'd like to express our strong desire that we give full consideration to this proposal, because I do believe that it does satisfy the requirements of avoiding a one-time large request for an increase in per capita, and also maintain the need to be able to manage our finances to accomplish our main mission financially, which is to preserve the precious resources that have been left to us from Masons before us, so that future Masons in this jurisdiction can enjoy the benefits of those resources in perpetuity. I would open it up to any questions that anybody would have at this time who is in the session right now.
Very worshipful. I don't see any questions currently. However, if there are some that arise, we'll certainly try to swing back to you before we close out the meeting. And I suspect that, during your sessions at the town hall, in your informational virtual sessions, I'm sure there'll be more questions, and greatly appreciate the summary that you provided to allow brethren to at least contemplate this as we move forward, and certainly look forward to the additional information that will be provided during your sessions in the spring. Thank you, Warrior Worshipful. Now, brethren, we certainly know that the pandemic cases have begun to increase again. And as a result, we obviously want all of our lodges and our brethren to be safe. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to our Deputy Grand Master, Right Worshipful Brother David Collins, who will provide us with an overview of the Grand Master's current COVID guidelines that are in place. Right Worshipful?
Thank you, Right Worshipful Hotchkiss. Good evening, brethren and all. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. So COVID, who knew we were going to be here? Who knew that when we started this whole ordeal in the beginning of this spring, I think everybody felt this would be something that we would have to look at some restrictions on within a few months, maybe a little bit longer, we'd be back to normal. We fought this before. Here we are in December. The good news is the vaccine is starting to come out. The bad news is, my brother, it takes time to get mass vaccination. It's going to take time, and we all got to continue to be patient and vigilant to get beyond this pandemic and certainly not be spreading or exposing our brethren to it. I will tell you that this has been something that no other Grand Master probably in the last century has faced. When we look back to the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, there's really not that much information on it. Again, we're a much more social distance society. We were much smaller back then. There was certainly masks done, but from a Grand Lodge level, it really wasn't impacted this state as it was, as it has been this past year. You know, I think, brethren, you all need to understand that the Grand Master has a lot of heartburn and has had a lot of sleepless nights over these past many months since the COVID pandemic, making sure that the guidance he's giving is appropriate. You know, I work a lot with the Grand Master, and I will tell you that if any of you have seen, our governor, John Sununu, governor of New Hampshire, has weekly briefings, which he's had all year long. He had multiple briefings at first, and now he's went to weekly briefings. When those weekly briefings happen, I can assure you the Grand Master, myself, and several others are watching those to see what continued guidance he's giving. You know, I think all of us face, and the governor talks about this, we all face a little COVID fatigue. I think it's been frustrating and challenging for us to have to wear a mask at this length. You know, myself, I have mild asthma, so wearing a mask is not really that great for me either. It's a challenge because I have certainly some breathing issues related to it, but I wear my mask on a regular basis. So that's what I want to start and talk about. You know, the Grand Master has had guidance going all along. When the lodges were shut down, you know, the Grand Master continued to inform the brethren about this. Then when the lodges started to be opened back up in phases, the Grand Master started out with some very specific guidance. The number one guidance that we have always said on this, and this follows right along with the state, federal, national, and some, you know, CDC guidelines, is masks, right? We all have these nice little masks. We have many different types of masks, but it is critical that we wear these, brethren. I want to talk about very quickly the two types of masks. This is a common mask that individuals wear. It's a cloth mask that can be reusable. We pour it over our face. We use it at certain events. But one thing I want to tell you, brethren, is this. Just like you wash your gloves, you wash your shirts, you wash your jackets, you should be laundering these masks every single day. Every single time you get back to your house, you should be laundering these masks to make sure they're clean and sanitary. The other thing, brethren, is we have these nice little disposable masks. There's some others. There's some very specific N95, much higher, much more safety conscious type masks. But these masks, brethren, right? These are a disposable mask, my brothers. When you wear this mask once, it is supposed to be tossed in the trash, not worn again. And my brethren, I'm here to tell you that I do go around the state. I just go out in the communities. I see people wearing these masks, and you see these little dirt lines on them. That tells me that mask has probably been worn multiple times. These are considered, in the healthcare industry, these are a disposable one-time use mask. So, brethren, if you're wearing a mask, if you're wearing a disposable mask, if you're wearing a cloth mask, if you're wearing an N95 mask, it is important that you keep those clean and safe. And why? Because COVID is spread by germs, because it's a viral infection, and it's spread by germs as you touch your face. And it's very common for us to touch our face when we're doing anything, and we're not washing our hands, certainly at every length. So when the Grand Master started earlier in the year, he already took a tone at the beginning saying you need to wear a mask. Brethren, I want to remind you all here that on November 20th of 2020, Governor John Sununu put out a mandate in the state of New Hampshire, and this is mandatory. This is mandatory guidance, and it says that indoors and outdoors, all citizens of the state over the age of 5 must wear some form of mask. Could be cloth, could be disposable, could be an N95, but that is mandatory. So brethren, I want to tell you, I want to read something here that when the Grand Master put out continued guidance here on December 1st, it says, and it's bullet pointed right at lodge member safety, it says, masks are to be worn at all times while in the lodge. That, my brother, is telling you from the time you enter the door of the lodge till the time you leave and go home, the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New Hampshire is requiring you to wear your mask. Definitive, without question. Where that would change, my brother, is when you sit down to eat, you should be wearing your mask. You should take your mask off. If you're eating, you should be socially distanced from others. Eat your meal, but once you're done, you shouldn't sit there and visit for the next half hour without your mask. You should immediately put your mask on and continue. My brethren, while you're in lodge, the same thing happens. Now, one thing that does happen, and we understand that, you see this certainly as you see our public officials doing this, you see the Grand Master. When somebody is standing up to speak at the head of the lodge, when they are socially distanced from others, at least 6 feet or more, when they're safe, they may take their mask off for a moment and speak, talk about what they're going to talk, and as soon as they're done speaking, the mask goes back on. So, my brethren, I can't stress this enough that the Grand Master has put this in his guidance, and this is a mandate that masks are to be worn in the lodge. Now, we certainly understand, brethren, sometimes have challenges where they have a medical issue where maybe they need to take it to get a little bit more of a breath of air. You should socially distance yourself. You should put your mask down for a few minutes, and then you should put it back on. If you're coming to lodge without a mask, my brothers, I'm sorry to say you shouldn't be coming to lodge, because your prime safety is the Grand Master and the Grand Lodge's biggest concern. We want to keep our members safe. You know, we've already had, brethren, as Right Worshipful Brother Hotchkiss talked about, that the COVID cases are spiking. I'm sure all you got to do is pick up the newspaper, look on the news, look on social media. The COVID cases are spiking. We want you to be safe. We are seeing masters of lodges canceling meetings because one of their members may have had contact with somebody with COVID and they don't want it to be a spreader event. Neither do we, brethren. So please wear your mask every time when you're in lodge. If you're not comfortable wearing a mask, then you shouldn't be attending lodge. You know, many of these lodge meetings now, they're doing in a hybrid format where they do the ritualistic opening and then they go to a Zoom or virtual meeting where you can stay from the safety of your own home. You don't have to worry about wearing a mask. So please keep that under consideration, brethren. So a few bullet points again, I want to go over about some of this guidance. And the reason the Grand Master issued this guidance is he wanted to make sure that it was clear to the brethren of the lodges in New Hampshire what the guidance is. And brethren, I want to remind you, because I've seen some questions on social media on the Grand Lodge website over the last month or so. When you are in a lodge in the state of New Hampshire, you are under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of New Hampshire and under the Grand Master. The guidance he is giving is for those lodges. It does not apply what guidance is being given by the Grand Lodge of Maine, the Grand Lodge of Mass, the Grand Lodge of Vermont, or other Grand Lodges. As you know, brethren, they have no jurisdiction over this Grand Lodge. This guidance that is being given is being followed with CDC guidelines, and it's also being followed what the governor of our state is giving for guidance. The Grand Master follows that very closely. We want to make sure we're in conformity with this. And I got to say, brethren, you know, when you look at New Hampshire compared to other states around even the New England region, we have a lot less restrictions than others. We don't have group size restrictions. We don't have venue restrictions like they do. You know, a lot of venues are not holding events because they're concerned, but we don't have those type restrictions. So again, let's go back to some of these bullet points and we'll walk through them. Masks are to be worn at all times in the lodge. Proper hand washing, hand sanitizer, masters of lodges. There should be adequate hand sanitizer when you walk in the building. There should be in the lodge room. There should be in the dining hall. You know, it's easy to buy hand sanitizer. You can buy large containers. It's very reasonable now. It's very easy to find. That should be readily available all over the lodge. And as well, it should be available for everybody. As well, hand sanitizer is great, but hand washing is an important thing. So again, in the bathrooms, there should be plenty of hand sanitizer, clean paper towels, worshipful masters, brethren that handle your building, the cleaning of your building. Make sure that your facilities have that, because, you know, oftentimes we go in, there's no paper towels. make sure that you have that so brethren can stay safe. Again, any brethren are reminded that if you're not feeling well and you're feeling sick, you should not attend a meeting. What it may be, if you have a fever, right? So we're taking temperatures as we go in. That's just one of many signs, and it's a sign that's really not overly accurate, but at least it's a guideline is what we're trying to go by. You have a cough, shortness of breath, muscle pain, new loss of taste or smell. You potentially been exposed to somebody with COVID. You should not come to a lodge meeting and potentially expose others. Think about it. Would you want somebody doing that to your family, brethren? So please stay on that. Meetings. The Grand Master is still allowing meetings in person. Meetings are still being held in person. However, that worshipful masters, particularly because you direct your lodge, you should understand that there is no requirement to meet in person. He's continuing his edict that any lodge in this jurisdiction can cancel a meeting. All the Grand Master's asking is that you give some reasonable, timely notice of it. Meaning, if you know your meeting is this Wednesday night and you're going to cancel it, notice your members, let them know you're doing it. Also, let your district deputy Grand Master and the Grand Master know you're canceling the meeting as a courtesy. So simply knows that. It would be just like in the event of an impending, catastrophic type snowstorm where you would cancel a meeting. Please, brethren, please make sure you do that. Once the decision has been made to cancel, that's what you do. Understand, there's also things you can do. You can use that hybrid format. There have been a lot of lodges that, again, there are limitations to the business of the meeting, but certainly lodges are concerned about meeting in person. I know in some parts of the state, like the North Country, has spiked up a lot. Several of the lodges have went to a hybrid format where what they're doing is they're actually meeting virtually is what they're doing to keep the basic business of the lodge to keep going. But certainly you cannot hold any degree work or anything when you do it in a virtual form. Member attendance, it is important to note, and for worshipful masters more particularly, it's important to note that no member should feel pressured into attending a meeting. If they do not feel comfortable, they should feel comfortable in saying they can't attend, and that's any officer of the lodge should feel comfortable in that. And worshipful masters, in your notices to your membership, you should stress that to your members that if you do not feel safe attending a meeting, please don't come. We don't want to feel pressured. We don't want that member that feels like he has to come to a meeting simply to come to the meeting. So degree work. Degree work is still being allowed, but there is some very specific guidance on degree work. And most of all right now, brethren, with the cases spiking up the way they are, take the word of caution. Maybe it's time to, if you're going to do a degree, maybe you pause for a couple months and hold that degree a little bit later. The cases have really been spiking up. We still give guidance there. It's still allowed, but really it's a word to caution to make sure you caution if you're going to end up doing degree work. Most lodges we've seen right now have really suspended their degree work or just pushed it till after the first of the year, waiting so when cases subside, when things are a little bit safer to do that. Because you would certainly not want to have a new candidate coming in the lodge and again be exposed to that. Veterans programs, because certainly our elderly brethren, our elderly folks are more susceptible to COVID. It's really, the Grand Master is really recommending right now you just hold off from veterans programs. Wait till the vaccine is out in more mass quantity. We get to the spring, things are in a better place, we hope, and feel they should be. And then you go back to doing veterans programs. Meals. Meal service is still allowed, brethren, but again, there is very specific guidance. It very much follows the restaurant guidelines in the state. Any lodge that is doing meal service in the state should follow that to the T. You should have a meal service team serving it. Those individuals, when they go through, everybody should be masked when they're doing it. They should be wearing gloves, be very safe sanitary procedures. And, if you don't feel you can do that, brethren, simply don't hold the meal. Again, many lodges are choosing, it's more risk than we want to take. We're not going to hold a meal. Coalition, that's absolutely fine. You can still sit there and visit. You can talk very well where you have that mask over your face. It's not a big deal, brethren. So please be cautious on that. The big thing, brethren, as well, we talk about cleanliness. This is for the halls, for the worshipful master, for certainly the building associations where you have people cleaning. It's really critically important that before and after every single meeting that the lodge is cleaned. And that means clean surfaces, cleaning your bathrooms, cleaning all the surfaces are handled, cleaning the truncheons, the implements within the lodge are handled. It's really critically important because we know that's how germs get spread. So it's really important that's done. As well, Grand Master also encourages all those buildings that are being rented out, make sure that, look at really closely on who you're allowing to use the building. And again, make sure that the building is cleaned before and after the use. So you'd hate to have that you rent out to like a local Cub Scout troop. Let's say you use the building, it's not cleaned. Maybe they have some germs they've spread. The building is not cleaned. You come in, some older brothers go in, and now they're exposed to COVID. Again, brethren, all this guidance, again, so much of it, you're probably sitting there saying, this is just common sense. It really is. We're not really asking a lot. But again, the Grand Master is asking you to be safe. And again, if you don't feel safe in going to your own lodge meeting, don't go, but just communicate to the Master. I feel uncomfortable, and I'm concerned about being exposed to COVID. Nobody's going to have an issue with that. But if you do attend the meeting, my brothers, remember, please wear your masks, because it's something that's safe. It's important to do. It's safe for you and it's safe for me. So please do that. And with that, I will pause. And Right Worshipful Brother Hotchkiss, I haven't been looking. I don't know if we have any questions.
Thank you, Right Worshipful. I do not currently see any questions for you specifically. However, for those who are in the audience, please remember that you can use the chat to ask any questions. And if for some reason they don't arise immediately during the session that is being presented, we will come back to them before we move on. So, Right Worshipful Collins, thank you very much for that very important reminder of the guidance that we have in play. Our Grandmaster, I believe, has done a fabulous job of providing appropriate guidance, but also allowing lodges flexibility. And you mentioned that very much so, allowing the Worshipful Masters to be able to cancel those meetings if need be. And as a reminder to the brethren, too, that, if you don't feel comfortable, don't attend. That's perfectly acceptable. And no one's going to look poorly upon you for making that decision. In fact, brethren, I had the opportunity during our annual session. Our Grandmaster held a banquet the night previously, and I told him I wasn't comfortable attending, and he was perfectly acceptable with that. I certainly missed being there and missed being with all my brethren, but it wasn't an environment I was currently comfortable with, and he was fully acceptable of that. And I greatly appreciate that guidance and his willingness to listen to my opinion. Brethren, before we move on to our next topic, I do want to circle back to a question for our Grand Treasurer. It's from Right Worshipful Brother David Smith. The question is, how do you expect the diminishing number of members in the lodges to support the current per capita, and on top of that, some sort of annual cost of living increase for Grand Lodge? So, Right Worshipful Brother Lawrence.
Okay, I'm going to answer this the way I think Right Worshipful Brother Smith is, or at least what he's trying to get at. I believe what you're asking is, how do we plan on balancing the burden of our annual per capita on the various members of this jurisdiction where the number of Masons is decreasing? And I think I talked about it a little bit in my report. Our per capita currently is set at $45 per member. What we're proposing to do, as opposed to having a massive increase or proposing a one-time large increase to that, is to have a small, and I'm assuming that you're alluding to the fact that this small incremental increase is some type of living or cost of living increase on top of that per capita. And you are correct. We are proposing a small annual increase to the per capita. And the reason that we're proposing that is instead of having some massive increase, if you have small incremental increases over time, you're better able to manage the burden that not only increased costs, but we're really looking at the combination of increased cost and decreasing membership. And just to kind of bring this home to make it relevant from a comparative standpoint, and I'm not saying that we want to go in this direction, but if I look at other jurisdictions around us in our area, for example, our brethren to the south of us in the grand jurisdiction of Massachusetts, they have a regular increase to their per capita. And their per capita, for example, for the year 2021 is set at $75 versus ours at $45. I'm very proud of the fact that our per capita is significantly less. And I'd like to make sure that we keep it that way. And I know we can't do anything about the extra burden that having less members in our jurisdiction places on us fiscally, other than potentially working to increase the number of members we have in this jurisdiction, which we are certainly going to do. But I definitely think that doing this type of a small incremental increase is the right way to go so that we lessen the possible burden on all brethren across our jurisdiction.
Thank you, Right Worshipful. Appreciate that that answer to that question. I currently don't see any other questions. So at this time, we will move on to our Grand Master, who will give us some guidelines and thoughts regarding annual meetings as well as installation of officers, because we know this is the season when those meetings occur and installations occur as well. So, most worshipful.
Thank you, Ray Worshipful. You're absolutely right. December, January, those are the times when we are typically getting phone calls saying it is installation season. So you ask the question, you know, if I'm feeling uncomfortable with having a face-to-face meeting, how am I going to have an election? I will remind you that it is a constitutional requirement that you have an election of officers. So there's really, you know, in this land of COVID, there are three different things that you can do. Certainly the first and preferred option is to hold your elections using the standard procedures that you have today, which would be to have a tiled face-to-face meeting and conduct your elections as you normally would. But I also freely understand that there are lodges out there that are in a tough spot right now with COVID, feeling concerns. You heard Right Worshipful Collins say no one should be punished for not coming to lodge. As much as we would love to have our brethren come to lodge, we also understand that health and safety comes first. So if you're in a position where you don't feel that it's right to have a face-to-face meeting at this time, then lodges may elect to conduct mail-in balloting similar to that which was performed most recently by the Grand Lodge for the 2020 election of Grand Lodge officers. The ballots are only to be mailed to Master Masons who are members in good standing of the lodge. And if you've got any questions about the proper procedures for how to go about doing a mail-in ballot, I would encourage you to call our Grand Secretary and or the Grand Lodge office. They're the ones that put together the ballots for us for our use at Grand Lodge, and they would be more than happy to walk you through that process. There is a third option, and that is that lodges can defer your elections until such time as face-to-face meetings can be called by the Worshipful Master. There isn't necessarily a requirement that says, well, you were supposed to do your elections in January, therefore they must occur in January. We're facing a pandemic, brethren, and if push comes to shove, the Worshipful Master is empowered to do what is right for his lodge. So if he needs to put that meeting off until February or March when things appear to be improving, he is certainly empowered to do so. I will have a reminder that I will offer for option number 3, and that is that an officer remains in office until his successor is installed. So if you decide to delay election of officers for a little bit, your existing officer corps remains in place. Don't worry about, my gosh, what happens? We're now into February and we haven't had our installation. The brethren that were installed previously, until their successor is installed, they remain in office. So a little bit of clarification. I hope that expands upon the presentation that Right Worshipful Brother Collins provided. Just gives you a bit more guidance. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Right Worshipful Brother Hotchkiss.
Most worshipful, I don't see any questions specific to that. I didn't know if maybe you wanted to touch a little bit upon installation of officers as well in conjunction with the annual meetings, though.
So installation of officers. You know, this is something that in many ways is synonymous with Veterans and Special Ladies programs, in that I'm a little bit nervous about them if not handled properly, because you are typically inviting members of the public to come in, and crowd size can get a bit unruly. I will say that I attended an installation of officers at Gideon Lodge this last weekend and was very impressed. They did limit the number of people that were coming to that event. There were only about 12 or 15 brethren in the room. Upon arrival, all safety precautions were taken. Excuse me. They did a fantastic job making sure that I felt safe and secure. Everyone was socially distanced and wearing a mask. So installation of officers can take place. Just don't feel like if you're in a situation where your lodge isn't conducive to social distancing or you're concerned about crowd size, it can be put off. Thank you, Right Worshipful.
Thank you, Most Worshipful. Greatly appreciate that guidance. And before we move on to our other next topic, brethren, I see a follow-up question from Right Worshipful Brother Smith for our Grand Treasurer. Right Worshipful Brother Lawrence, the question is the increase going to be automatic each year?
To answer that question simply, as proposed, yes, it would be an annual increase that would happen automatically each year. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Right Worshipful. And now, brethren, I would like to reintroduce our Deputy Grand Master, Right Worshipful Brother David Collins, to introduce to you the new rollout of the master's classes. Right Worshipful.
Thank you, Right Worshipful Hotchkiss. Again, brethren, good evening. Now on to more positive topics. So the master's classes. So let's take a look back for a moment here. Let's do a little history lesson and talk about the master's classes as they were started. Some 20 plus years ago, and they started out of District 1, these master's classes started. And they really started as a way to help those brethren who were coming up in the officer line to better understand really what their duties and responsibilities were. You know, certainly in the installation ritual, some of it's laid out. There's certainly some good mentors in lodge to help you do this. But it was found that, you know, really sit down and do some kind of outline with a group of topics to really set this up and do it would work very well. So that's what happened. So the master's classes took off, and then it became a statewide program. And for the statewide program, what they did in each of the districts around the state, they assigned a coordinator. And that coordinator was given the topic outline. And what they were to do was meet on a monthly or regular basis and essentially reach out to all lodges in the district, move it around the district, and essentially talk about those various topics. And when you completed all the core topics, you got a certificate saying you passed the master's classes. And they continued on because it was always a little bit of a revolving door. Some brethren would miss some brethren would come in. The topic, it was really an outline, so it wasn't a hard discussion, but meaning there were topics to be covered, but there was certainly room for it, for a little bit of change. What happened over time is, brethren, like any other change. When programs aren't tweaked and updated, they become dated sometimes. And what really happened over the last few years, we've seen it for many years now, in certain parts of the state, the master's classes continued to go along on a monthly basis, had a nice turnout, nice attendance, good discussions. And in other parts of the states where the coordinators maybe got a little tired of doing the job, somebody else took over and maybe really didn't have the same heart in it. What happened is we've kind of seen it fail. And what it came down to, brethren, a year and a half ago, there were really only a couple places in the state that were doing master's classes. So what happened was I spoke with the Grand Master, Ken Clay, at the beginning of his term and said, you know, I think it's time that a group looks to maybe do a rework of the master's class. So myself and Right Worshipful Brother Dan Hotchkiss and Right Worshipful Brother Dave Ackridge met, and we started discussing what maybe the master's class could be. Well, what we found is, brethren, the topics that are included in the master's class are wonderful, but there's a lot more topics there to do. So wouldn't it be wonderful to do more of those topics? So what happened was, Right Worshipful Brother Ackridge was leading a group out of District 5, and he started to kind of see what was working on the topics, maybe look at some new topics, and just start feeling out really what would happen if we changed things up a little bit. And then, brethren, what happened in March of this year? COVID hit. And what COVID did is really kind of fast-forwarded this whole process really well. And it's really this is one of the good things that came out of COVID, right? Because here we are virtually. Who would have said 12 months ago that the Grand Master, the Grand Lodge of New Hampshire, would be sitting here with some lineup from Grand Lodge officers on a Q&A session virtually? I'm looking, we have a nice group of people right now. Would we have said that maybe 5 would have done it? What format would we have used? Who knows? But what COVID did for the master's class is it put it virtual. And because brethren had no lodge meetings to go to, nothing was going on, it was a great forum to test some new products out and see what happened. So from that, brethren, myself, Right Worship Brother Hotchkiss, Right Worship Brother Ackridge came back together. And we discussed, and we've been discussing some of the changes that really need to happen within the master's class. It's time for a refresh, brethren. The first thing we're going to start with is a refresh of the name. Master's class, again, great topics, great topics. The problem was that for many brethren out there, it kind of seems like the same old thing. It looks like it's only good for somebody that's a master when we know it's much more useful for other brethren than that. So it's time for a name refresh. So what we did is we threw a bunch of names around and came up with this one. So the new master's class is going to come out and be rebranded as Granite State Cornerstones classes. Here we are in New Hampshire, the Granite State. Our brethren on the communications committee have a Granite State podcast. So we thought Granite State Cornerstones, because it's those cornerstones, brethren, right? Those cornerstones are the thing that help develop us as an individual. When we stand in a lodge and we see the rough ashlar and the perfect ashlar, we're always trying to become the perfect ashlar. But how do we do that? Through discussion, through mentoring, through education. So that's the first thing we're going to do, brethren, is we're going to rename it Granite State Cornerstones and much more broaden the topics and discussions so it's for every brother, not just for somebody that's going through an officer line. The next thing we had to do is, how do we work to make it a little bit easier? Sometimes in these groups, you may have 10 people turn out, you may have 20, you may have 5. There's value in a few people sitting around a table discussing it. But what we also discussed is and felt that within the 8 districts in the state, because the districts are a great management tool, let's kind of geo-group these groups together. So I'm sure some of you have already seen and probably already participated in Area 51 presentations, which is District 5 and District 1, or Network 23, which is District 2 and District 3. So what's been happening is, brethren, is these have really been used as test cases for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to geo-group the state around. And what we're going to do in these geo-groups we're going to geo-group essentially District 5 and District 1 together. We're going to group District 2 and District 3 together in one group. We're going to group District 4 and District 7 together in one group. And then we're also going to group District 6 and District 8 together. So out of the 8 districts in the state, we're going to kind of narrow it down a little bit to 4 groups. And in these 4 groups, what we're going to do is take on a little bit of an ambitious plan. What we're going to do is, led by the 2 district deputy grand education officers in each of the districts, they're going to be leading essentially the team to put these together. What we're going to do is, right now, because again, with COVID going on, with the winter months going on and travel, virtual is a great way to do it. We're going to start these out virtually. So what we're going to do, brethren, is the education officers are going to be getting together here in another week, and we're going to put that plan together. And what we're going to do is put out a quarterly schedule. And on that quarterly schedule, brethren, all of the brethren in the state will be able to see what the topic is and when, what night, and what time the various geo groups are meeting, those 4 geo groups are meeting. What also happens is, brethren, by doing this virtually, starting out virtually, if, for example, you're not able to make a night on one geo group, you can easily go on the other, because there's no restriction, my brethren, of just because you're in that district you need to attend. Maybe there's a topic in another geo group district that you want to attend. Go attend it. Attend them both. No issue whatsoever, brethren. So certainly in these groups, it's going to give you a lot more choices, right? Because right now, brethren, if we're holding a meeting in person in, for example, Tilton, New Hampshire at 7 o'clock on Tuesday night, you got to be in Tilton, New Hampshire at 7 o'clock on Tuesday night. And maybe because of work, maybe because of weather, you can't make the meeting, but it looks like a great topic. And that's the great thing that this whole COVID has done. It has allowed us to meet in this virtual forum and actually use it much more conducive, right? Isn't this great? Because when all of us finish this meeting tonight, finish this discussion tonight, we're simply going to shut off our computers, go down and be with our spouse, and have an enjoyable rest of the evening. It's not taking up all that driving time, which so many of our Masonic meetings often do. So again, brethren, that's what we're going to do. We're going to start coming out with a quarterly schedule. On that quarterly schedule, we're going to put the topics out, and we're going to let you know. And you can choose what topic who you want to go to. Maybe there's somebody speaking in a certain geo group that you want to hear from, that you want to get involved in discussion. You know, these Zoom platforms are wonderful, where you can meet, you can see each other, you can discuss. Is it as good as face-to-face? No, but it's pretty darn close, brethren. So again, in the program discussions, what we want to do is we want to go much more than what the master's class was doing. We want to actually bring out Masonic discussions where maybe one night what you're going to be talking about is maybe something rather than just protocol. What you're going to be talking about is, you know, in other jurisdictions, this is a standard protocol when you travel. In New Hampshire, this is what we do. For example, you know, putting your hand over your heart at certain times. In other jurisdictions, it's done differently. You can have much more open discussions and not be stuck on a specific topic. Maybe you want to talk about how the anti-Masonic period, how did it really impact Masonry, and how does that relate to today's Masonry today? You know, that's a great topic of discussion. We can do things like that. There really isn't going to be a limit to these topics, so it's going to be a much more broader topic. We're going to still keep certainly those master's class topics in there, but we're going to go much broader, brethren. As well, one thing that we did do that we've already broke off, we will continue to, but include more of those things, is in the last year and a half, I've led several, and I'm scheduling one now right after the first of the year, another leadership training where officers in a lodge can sit down for a couple Saturday mornings, couple hours at a time, and really look on what the role and responsibility is of their job. Because, brethren, I think too often we think that the officers, the wardens and the master are the ones, and the secretary and treasurer, they're the ones that have the real duties in the lodge. But you know, brethren, in my leadership training, you know, the one thing I've talked about is the Tyler. Do you realize the Tyler is probably one of the most critically important people in any lodge? It's not because he decides who can come in and out of the lodge. It's because he is, as the term I've used in the business world, he's the director of first impressions. Ever go to that lodge meeting when you were a new Mason and the lodge meeting already started and the Tyler's there and he's kind of a grumpy old cuss, not very friendly? How did you really feel about driving to attend that meeting? You know, that's a really critically important role, and I really think that is something that they need to think about. So in that leadership training, we talk about that. How can even individuals like the Tyler take on a role? What are their short-term and long-term goals on that? So again, leadership training will be broke out. We'll be talking about much broader discussion topics. You know, the other thing, brethren, is we've really decided in the first year, we have what we call these kind of hybrid meetings, which are, we actually have brethren meeting in a lodge room, and then we have brethren coming in like into a Zoom meeting in a virtual forum. To keep it simple in the first year, we're going to say these meetings are either going to be virtual or in person. Now, right now, again, with the COVID, expect for probably the first 5 to 6 months, probably through the spring of next year, these are going to be totally virtual discussions. So the other thing, brethren, it makes it a lot easier. All you have to do is travel to your computer and join the Zoom meeting. And again, we're going to make this information readily available. So in year one, it's not going to be hybrid meetings. They're either going to be in person or they're going to be virtual. They're not going to be a combination of both, simply because the logistics of those meetings sometimes gets tough. Somebody comes in late to a meeting. Virtually, it's not so bad. But the problem is, if you don't have a good video screen and you're setting in an in-person meeting, you can't see the people. What happens is there's a lot of background discussion. Sometimes the people can't see what's going on. So again, brethren, that's one thing we're going to do. And again, you know, it's certainly something we're going to develop it as we go. We have a lot of topics we're going to do. There's a lot of great speakers around the state. What you may find is you may find one speaker speaking to various district geo groups over the course of a couple months, brethren. Because again, if somebody's a good speaker, if it's an engaging topic, what does it matter, you know, what district or what group it's in? So again, the district deputy grand education officer is going to be leading it, but it's not going to be their sole job to just put everything together. They're going to be working with the grand education officers, with certainly the Grand Lodge line officers, putting together these programs, making them interesting, but also giving even you choices. You know, the master's class forum, the way it was set up, you really didn't have a choice. There was X amount of topics, and whatever topic was being given, that was it. We're really now with this whole Cornerstones classes, it's going to be, hey, we're setting up our Cornerstones classes for the next quarter. What's a topic you'd like to speak about? And maybe you're a new EA, maybe you're a new Master Mason that says, you know, I'd like to talk about this in our next Cornerstones class. Can we do that? Of course. The intent, brethren, is not to make these a 2 or 3 hour marathon session. It's to make them a 60 to 90 minute meeting where you have a nice discussion. There's plenty of Q&A for everybody, but as well, it's respectful of your time. So we're looking forward to it. I know in talking with our Worshipful Brother Hotchkiss and Ackridge, I'm really looking forward to this because I think this is a great forum for us to use and really continue to expand the education, the mentoring that all the Masons in the state are getting. So again, you're going to be hearing more about this over the coming weeks. Again, the District Deputy Grand Education Officers are going to be putting together some plans. The month of January may be a little slow start. A couple of districts may be set, and a couple of the other districts are getting set. But plan within the next 60 days, 60 to 90 days. There'll be a hard thing. The Grand Lodge office will be sending out a quarterly communication, which actually details that. We'll certainly make sure and share it. Certainly on social media, because that's a great forum to go in and get into these private groups and get the invites and everything. So you're not having to email. Do I email Jim or do I email Bob to get the meeting invite, especially when you're doing these things virtually? So again, a lot of exciting things coming on, brethren. It's an exciting time because, again, I think education is a wonderful thing. You know, the Grand Education Officer and Deputy Grand Education Officer just had yesterday an Entered Apprentice workshop. Had some wonderful brothers there with lots of questions. I'm sure, I think everybody left there with more questions than they had when they came in, but we hope that they also got some answers, some things. You know, this is a wonderful fraternity. Education has developed so much over the last 10 years plus in this Grand Lodge. We now have things like an Entered Apprentice workshop. A Fellowcraft workshop is coming out. We have a Master Mason seminar. We have leadership training now. And now what we're doing is taking these Cornerstones classes to another level to keep these open discussions and keep you learning more about Freemasonry and hopefully educating yourself so you become a more active, engaged member and really understand what it's all about. But most especially, not be afraid of asking the questions like, what's this for? What's this about? Again, it's all about talking and communicating, brethren. So with that, I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to turn back to Right Worshipful Hotchkiss if there are specific questions out there. I see that.
Thank you, Right Worshipful Collins, for that extremely exciting news. We are very much looking forward to the Granite State Cornerstones classes and what they will offer the members of our jurisdiction. I actually do not see any specific questions for you at this time. So, brethren, certainly if you have any questions, please let us know. We'll be glad to answer them as best we can. And if some of them happen to come up after the session, feel free to shoot us an email at our Grand Lodge email addresses through the Grand Lodge website. But brethren, that effectively concludes our programs for this evening. Certainly want to thank you all for joining. I hope you continue to find these sessions informative. I know I greatly appreciate the Grandmaster's confidence in me for being the MC and being able to run these programs. Certainly very much appreciate that. And at this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to our Grandmaster for some closing comments. Most worshipful.
Very good. Thank you, Right Worshipful. I echo your sentiments. I think tonight's program was outstanding. We heard a little bit about our annual and semi-annual sessions. We heard about safety protocols, how to manage your election of officers and installations. We heard about Cornerstone. Certainly very exciting news. We heard from our Grand Treasurer about some of the work that he's doing to ensure that Freemasonry is here in perpetuity. All of this great work comes together to really reinforce my 4 pillars of retention, ritualistic excellence, Masonic education, and communication. Brethren, that's really what binds us together. But what truly binds us together is the fact that we are a family. Now, more than ever, the world needs Freemasonry. We have something that we can add. Brethren, I would like to extend to you a very happy holiday. For those that celebrate Hanukkah, I congratulate you for the celebration you just concluded. For those who participate in Christmas celebrations, this is your big week. It's your chance to gather this family and friends to have that wonderful annual ceremony. And then very soon now, we'll be turning the pages to 2021, where we'll have a vaccine that will be thoroughly rolled out, and Freemasonry will be restored back to the way it was not too long ago. So I thank you for your indulgence as we get through these remaining months to make sure that everyone is safe and secure, so that hopefully by May, when we have a change in leadership, and I have all the confidence in the world that your new leadership will take the reins and bring Masonry to a level never seen before in a very positive way. So brethren, I want to wish you a safe and happy holiday season. And I look forward, hopefully, to seeing you at a town hall this spring. Thanks.